Hey folks, welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. I'm your host Pat, as always. Big old stack of CDs to talk about. A few of these are from the Philly trip, and then there's a bunch more that have just been kind of piling up for a while. I have even more new stuff to talk about, but I don't want to sit in front of this webcam for 45 minutes to an hour. So we'll try to keep this relatively short and get on with your day. So playing in the background, one of the Philly purchases. This is a Desultory demos compilation from Beyond the Visions of Death. Compiling the From Beyond demo, the Death Unfolds demo, and the Visions demo. See what they did? It's good. There's also some live tracks at the end. We'll see how they sound. I almost never like when re-releases do that. I'm not sure if this is official or not. I can't seem to find a label. But all these are from the early 90s. Excellent melodic-leaning Swedish death metal band that everybody owes it to themselves to check out if they like death metal of any kind, really. But this is their demo stuff. So let's just get right into it, shall we? So we got the Villains. This was $2. I couldn't say no, even though I own this on vinyl. Drenched in the Poisons. Brooklyn black metal. Self-proclaimed street metal. Real sleazy, nasty. Taking a lot of inspiration from the quote-unquote first wave stuff. Very Bathory, Venom, Celtic Frost. Some kind of stuff like Bulldozer in there. A little bit more maybe technical. Like there's also, you know, kind of a Voivod kind of thing. Not to just throw band name after band name, but just to give you an idea of what they sound like. Great band. Nasty, nasty vibes with them. I have everything they put out. I feel like they were probably the most underrated band on Nuclear War now, probably along with like Sacrifix and Faust Coven, two other bands I feel like never really got the attention they deserved on that label. But at any rate, I figured $2, play it in the car. Getting a new car tomorrow, by the way, so hopefully it'll have a CD player. Once I get rid of this one, it's going to be my first car without a tape player. I've had cars with tape players up until this point, which means I'm broken old. Anyway, moving on. Lifelover. Sjukdom. Swedish band. I guess this is DSBM. I don't know anything about that genre. I just kind of picked it up for the hell of it. It looked interesting. I've heard of this band for years. They've been on my radar. I just never really felt quite compelled to check them out. Was not disappointed. Maybe a little bit confused. I do enjoy this quite a bit. It reminds me more of almost like Peaceville stuff more than anything else that I'm familiar with. You know, there's a lot of piano and kind of melancholy chord progressions, so the first thing that comes to mind is My Dying Bride and Paradise Lost. I know that's way away from what they're probably trying to do. It's got those I'm having a nervous breakdown kind of black metal vocals for the most part. There's some speaking in French going on. It comes off very highbrow to me, so I don't know quite how to take it. There's also a drum machine, which in some instances kind of helps the kind of cold vibes on this, but also at some points just sounds like a fucking typewriter. But I like the songwriting for sure. You know, I'll definitely give it a lot more chances than the 2 or 3 that I've given it in the past day or so. Classic. Deceased, Luck of the Corpse. You know, when Deceased was more or less playing straight up death metal. First LP. It has some demo bonuses on it. I can't remember the name of the demo. Radioactive something. But this is probably still my favorite record by them. I'm kind of hit or miss with a lot of their stuff. This just rips all the way through. If you like early death and stuff like that, you can't go wrong with this. The vocals are still very brutal, courtesy of King Fowley. There is enough, like, classic heavy metal, evil heavy metal kind of haunting this in the riffs and kind of the melodies that they throw in here and there, but there's also very early blasts, you know, almost kind of, you know, loose blast, proto-blast, I don't know what we want to call it, but not straight up mechanical sounding stuff. All this sounds like really organic and completely fucking vicious. Just great death metal. I don't really know what I should say about this other than I slept on this for a very long time. Like, a really long time. Immortal, Pure Holocaust. I saw these guys in 2000, 2001, whenever it was, with Satyricon. A lot of that really harsh, hissy, high-end, blast beat kind of laden, very fast, tight blast beat, kind of laden black metal didn't resonate with me for a really long time, and then for whatever reason, the past couple of years, it's just been creeping in more and more and more, so I've been getting into all the basics. I mean, like I've mentioned before, I think this year was the year I got really into Marduk, just in time for them to become media darlings, am I right? So, yeah. This is an utter classic of harsh Norwegian black metal. You should know that. I'll just leave it at that. Sacrifice, Torment, and Fire. First album, classic Canadian thrash, real satanic, evil, early thrash. You know, I think it's like maybe even more of a stripped down and raw, like Bonded by Blood Exodus kind of. Real wiry, real pissed. Not technically perfect, which I like, and almost like an unintentionally punkish kind of thing. It's not deliberately trying to be like a crossover thing. Great shrieky thrash vocals, awesome stuff. This is their best. I have everything up to Apocalypse Inside. All of them are really good, solid thrash albums, but Torment and Fire is where it's at. This was re-released in 2013 on Marquee, which I think was a Brazilian label, but it came out, I don't know, 1980, mid-80s at some point. This was just a random snag, Insatanity. This is a PA band that later moved to Florida, Divine Decomposition. I just remember these guys because they played back home sometime in the late 90s randomly with, I think, a very early Hatebreed incarnation and like Cause for Alarm. They got put on this random hardcore bill. I wasn't even at the show, but I remember thinking like, oh, that's kind of funny, like straight up death metal band. And I mean, this is 1996, which is actually the next year I'm going to be talking about for my Year of Our Lord thing. You know, when death metal was definitely kind of plummeting in popularity amongst a lot of people. And this is a cool, good CD. Definitely a lot of black metal elements. As you can see, this guy's repping some kind of interesting corpse paint style stuff there. Very fast. It kind of alternates between fast, intense death metal with shrieky vocals, and they kind of go into some low end, like not slamish, but like more kind of moshy brutality. That almost kind of reminds me of these gentlemen here. They did a lot more records after that, but I bought it because I heard of them that one time. They've always been kind of in the back of my mind. Then we got Uncanny Splinter for Nyctophobia. Again, classic Swedish stuff. And this I used to have on vinyl via The Crypt. They put out a really fancy box set of, I think, this and some other stuff, maybe some demo stuff. And I foolishly flipped it years ago. I was broke. And this was a really cheap purchase via Discogs, seller from Greece. So I figured, why not? But it's kind of along the lines of early Desultory, like the first Desultory record. There's a certain amount of Stockholm and a certain amount of Gothenburg, I feel like. There's, you know, the kind of melodic style riffing, and it's also very gritty, evil, nasty death metal as well. Very commanding, bellowing, excellent growls on this. And we got Devastation from Chicago. Total fucking ripping death. This compiles several demos and an unreleased EP, I believe. This is classic Chicago stuff from the mid-80s. Very early, you could call it death metal, you could call it brutal thrash, like I was talking about a while ago. That you know, kind of bridging the gap kind of stuff, crossover stuff. But very early growls. I think probably Death and Master were the only ones around. There were probably a few others that were doing vocals that low. The music is straight up thrash metal, but it's also pretty intense, pretty fast, pretty face ripping. Good stuff. I don't know what this came out on, nor do I care. Orodruin, Epicurean Mass. So this came out sometime in the 2000s, 2003. This band was from Rochester, New York, and it's pretty unique doom. I feel like the doom that's coming out nowadays tends to be, oh, we're traditional, you know, we lean more towards the Candlemass side of things, oh, we're a Sabbath worship kind of band. I feel like there were more bands like Orodruin and Warhorse from Worcester, like 10 years ago, when there was less of that stuff going on, that were kind of forging their own path. Gates of Slumber, too. And, I mean, these guys do have that very, very, very detuned, distortion-soaked, like, probably orange or crate, yeah. Get a good sound out of a crate, let me tell you. But, orange or sun amp, you know, kind of very, very thick, stonery kind of tone. But they have plenty of classic heavy metal, you know, past the 70s, new wave of British heavy metal kind of influence coming in as well. At certain points, they get so murky and slow, it kind of almost reminds me of Forest of Equilibrium by Cathedral, which is one of my favorite doom metal records of all time. So it gets that miserable and it slows it down. It's definitely not just a Sabbath clone. It's definitely not just trying to do, you know, a Southern Lord kind of thing. It's its own deal, and it's definitely really metal. Alright. Hey, you heard about this? It's new Judas Priest. You probably have. It's receiving a lot of accolades for good reason. Personally, yeah, I'm one of those people that hasn't really been into anything they've done since Painkiller, admittedly. I've tried. You know, I gave Nostradamus a shot years ago, was not into it, didn't like any of the Ripper Owens stuff, never really heard Angel of Redemption, or whatever it's called, but I heard so much good stuff about this, and I'm all in, man. I am all in. You know, it's got a lot of elements. A lot of people say Painkiller, and it does seem to have some of that, but there's also a lot of their classic 80s material, especially with the choruses. Seems really, that style seems really well represented in this. The Sea of Red song at the end is definitely a fist in the air, epic kind of tune, victorious kind of tune. So, yeah, check it out. If you haven't already, you should probably have. This is Everything by Yuppicide. Very sentimental band to me. First hardcore band I ever saw live back in 1893. This is 88 through 98. It's got all their collected works. I could talk about this band for hours, but I really don't want to do that to anybody. They were a very unique band from the Lower East Side, I believe. They were all art students, though, so they weren't just, like, tough guys. They had a really interesting approach visually and musically, and while there's a certain plotting, you know, tough kind of Cro-Mags backbone here and there, there's also plenty of Oi influence, and there's like a rockabilly song, and they have bits of metal, and also they can play really well, and they could play really well when they were around. British singer, which also makes it very, very different than a lot of New York stuff. But yeah, looking for something a little different, check it out. I thought they were great the whole time. Got Brodys Militia. This is the Appalachian 12-gauge Massacre. Yeah, just randomly, I heard more and more about this band. I avoided them 10 years ago, or whenever they started, just because it was, it sounded like, well, there's a guy's name in the title, and they're a fast hardcore band, and there was a period where, after Charles Bronson was a thing, there were tons of bands that were just calling themselves, like X, Clint Eastwood X. It was just annoying, and all those bands were pretty terrible, except for Charles Bronson. So, I don't know why, I just had it in my head somewhere that, like, you know, they were called Brodys Militia, and I wasn't sure if it was, like, Brody from Mallrat, and then it occurred to me, you idiot, it's, Bruiser Brody, and these guys are wrestling fans, so it's totally cool. At any rate, this is really unique stuff. It sounds like Confederacy of Scum, shit like Anti-Scene and Limecell. They do a Limecell cover on here. Invader One Must Die. Bare knuckle, raw knuckle, fucking rock and roll fueled punk, mixed with just straight up blasting, fast power violence, essentially. Thrashcore, or whatever you want to call it, and it's great. There's hooks all over it. Awesome, pissed off lyrics, just about hating fucking everybody. Can't go wrong. Stigmata. Do unto others before they do unto you. This is great. I've been getting more and more into this band the past couple of years. For whatever reason, they were sort of on my radar growing up. I'm from not too far from them. They're an Albany band. Troy, rather. I correct myself. A lot of their records are very kind of mosh-inducing, repetitive, chuggy kind of stuff, but with actual songwriting chops behind it, you know, real riffs and that sort of thing. Done very well. Their first album's almost bordering on, like, thrash a little bit, The Calling of the Just. This one came out either in the very late 90s or the early 2000s. It says 2000 on the back here. This came out on Victory, their only record on Victory. And this is a lot more of like a faster, like Warzone pace, like a fast New York hardcore kind of thing. They do definitely break it down plenty on this. Awesome vocals from Bob Riley, real commanding, very, very, very tough and deep. Just what you want with this style of hardcore, if you like that kind of thing. I knew I had to pick up Human Remains sooner or later. This is the discography. Where were you when? 2 discs. Human Remains, if you don't know, were experimental, I guess, or just wacky fucking death metal band from New Jersey that were around in the 90s. Dave Whitty played drums, who was in Discordance Axis, Municipal Waste now, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if they were the first band to do this, but they utilized the volume knob trick a lot, where they'd be playing a riff and go in and out. So, you know, kind of weird, jazzy stuff. A lot of grind in there, though. Blasting, stuff like that. I think they went on to influence a lot of hardcore that came out later. They bore some similarities, almost, with the discordant nature of, like, their slower riffs to bands like Dead Guy. And Coalesce and stuff like that, but they were way more fast and just really cool, unique fucking death metal. Got the new Hooded Menace. Haven't really checked in with these boys in a while. Didn't like their last couple of releases. I loved Never Cross the Dead. Sounds to me like they got a new singer. I didn't research that, but I'm pretty sure they have a new singer. Doesn't sound like a 300-year-old oak tree rotting and then sped up. It's essentially what that guy sounded like. A little bit more emotion and higher register to the vocals. The music seems a little bit more upbeat, maybe. A little bit more layered with melody, but it's been so long since I listened to their other records, it's hard to say. It's quality doom death, though. I enjoy it. Only spun it a couple times so far. It's good. And then I haven't spun this at all yet, but I'm familiar with the band, so I'll talk about it. At the end of this, I'm going to talk about a few tapes next, and I ordered some stuff from Von Frost Records, which is a distro and tape label from Canada that do extremely limited, cool re-releases of hard-to-find stuff. We'll get into that in a second. But they're also distroing this Napalm Raid singles compilation. Has all 4 7-inches that the band Napalm Raid did, and I love their album from last year, Wheels of War, I believe it's called. Gears of War? Wheels of War. And they have a, you know, a crusty D-beat kind of thing going on, but there's a little bit more depth to their music and ferocity and sort of just an extra little edge they've got that makes them super memorable. Really like them. Nova Scotia, Canada is where they're from. Looking forward to spinning that, probably after I get done with this. And the tapes, these are insanely limited. I think they make, like, sometimes they put out like 7 or 17 copies of each. So it's definitely, like, appealing to the collector scum side of me. The biggest one for me, they actually remade this just because I'll never own one of these, because I'm not spending half one of my paychecks. It's the Bathory Yellow Goat tape. I have the self-titled Bathory, but it's one of those 2003 reissues where it's remastered and remixed and sounds like ass. I thought it would just be nice to have a physical copy of the original version. It's the only Bathory record that I didn't have an early pressing of with the right sound. So that's cool. You know, these are all like $6 or $7 a pop. Misfits, Wolf's Blood. These are the original sessions of the Earth AD recordings. Half of it's instrumental without Glenn's vocals on them, but the original version before it got kind of fucked with in the studio sounds really different. So if you like that Earth AD stuff, this is a real treat. A repro of the first Cannibal Corpse demo. Whoop. There it is. Which is cool. Definitely almost straight up thrash with like a little bit more change-ups that make it sound kind of death metal. You know, there's like a little bit more blasting and stuff like that, but it almost sounds like The Accused. Like, The Accused influence really shows through on this, which is cool. Chris Barnes vocals, not guttural at all yet. I'm a screaming thrash, demented thrash kind of vocals. So that's it. Probably gonna do, I don't think I have time right now. Gonna pick up the little guy soon, but gonna be doing a 96 video soon. Getting back into talking about some street punk of varying quality, because that's what I was listening to back then. Foolish little me. And that's about it. So take care. Thanks for subbing once again.